Right now, somewhere outside your window, it might be raining. You might have already checked your phone 11 times today just to see when it will stop. You feel it, that low hum of restlessness. Four walls start to close in a little. But the real answer to why you feel this way is far stranger than boredom. It goes back further than your house, further than your city, further than agriculture itself. It goes back to a species huddled under rock, watching the sky fall for the seventh day in a row, with nowhere else to go. You were not built for indoor days. Not really. Your body was shaped by open horizons, moving herds, ripening fruit, long walks under changing light. So what happened when the sky refused to cooperate? What did your ancestors do when the rain did not stop for a week? The answer is not what you think. It is not simply misery and waiting. Something else happened in those wet grey stretches of prehistory. Something that may have shaped the very way your brain works today. Something that turned bad weather into one of the most important forces in human development. Strange, right? Start with the obvious problem. Early humans did not have waterproof jackets. They did not have insulated boots or sealed windows. A week of relentless rain, especially in the wrong season, was a genuine threat. Cold seeps into the body faster when skin is wet. Fires are harder to start and keep burning. Food that could normally be gathered or hunted becomes harder to find because animals hide and plants get soaked and moldy. For early Homo sapiens and for the Neanderthals before and alongside them, a week of steady rain was not an inconvenience. It was a test. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies have found something consistent across nearly every culture that faces bad weather for extended periods. Group behavior changes, movement stops, talking increases. This shift is not incidental. It appears to be almost universal, whether the setting is the Kalahari Desert or the Ice Age plains of Europe. One of the clearest windows into this pattern comes from anthropologist Polly Weissner, who spent years studying the Jew/Hwansi people of the Kalahari. She recorded their conversations during the day compared to their conversations at night, when they were confined near the fire, often because of weather or darkness. During the day, conversation revolved around practical matters: who found food, where the water was, complaints, logistics, small disputes. But at night, especially when people were forced together for long stretches, the subject matter transformed entirely. Stories emerged, myths, jokes, songs about ancestors and animals and distant lands. Weissner's research suggested that firelight and the enforced closeness it created was directly tied to a surge in storytelling. Now picture that same dynamic stretched across 7 days of unbroken rain. If normal nightly downtime produced this shift towards story and myth, what happened during a week when nobody could leave the shelter at all? This is where the deep dive gets interesting. Rain, oddly enough, may have been one of the accidental engineers of human culture. Consider the archaeological record. Some of the richest deposits of prehistoric art, tools, and personal ornamentation are found in caves and rock shelters that would have offered protection from exactly this kind of extended bad weather. Lascaux in France, Chauvet also in France, home to paintings estimated to be over 30,000 years old. Blombos Cave in South Africa, where engraved ochre and shell beads have been found dating back over 70,000 years. These were not casual painting sessions during a nice afternoon. Many of these locations, based on soil and sediment analysis, appear to have functioned as long-term shelters used repeatedly across seasons, including wet ones. Think about what that means. A group of humans trapped together in a dim, damp space with nothing to hunt, nothing to gather, and firelight flickering against stone. What do you do with that time? You already know the answer, even if you have never thought about it this way. You talk, you tell stories, you make marks, you teach the children something just to fill the hours. This is not speculation without support. Archaeologist Stephen Mithen has argued extensively that periods of forced cognitive downtime, including seasonal confinement due to weather, likely played a role in what he calls cognitive fluidity, the blending of different types of thinking, like social reasoning, technical skill, and natural history knowledge, into single creative acts. Cave painting is a perfect example. It requires observing animals closely, understanding materials, coordinating a group, and expressing an idea symbolically. That is 4 different mental skill sets merging into one act, and idle, trapped time is exactly the kind of environment that encourages that kind of blending. Here is the counterintuitive twist. Comfort is not what made human culture explode. Boredom did. For most of evolutionary history, survival left very little room for idle hours. Every waking moment tended to be filled with immediate necessity. Find food, avoid predators, maintain the fire, care for children. But bad weather forced pauses onto this relentless schedule. Rain did not care how urgent your tasks were. It grounded everyone together in the same space for uncomfortably long stretches. And it turns out that unstructured, forced togetherness may be one of the single greatest incubators of complex human behavior. This connects directly to something evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar has spent decades researching, known as the social brain hypothesis. Dunbar's work suggests that human brains grew large not primarily to solve technical problems like tool use, but to manage complex social relationships within growing groups. Grooming in primates serves this social bonding function. But grooming does not scale well. You cannot groom 50 people individually and still have time to survive. Dunbar proposed that language, and by extension storytelling, evolved partly as a replacement, a way to bond many people simultaneously through shared narrative instead of one-on-one physical touch. Now imagine the ideal setting for that kind of large group verbal bonding to actually happen. Not a busy hunting day, not a scattered foraging afternoon, a wet, dark, cramped shelter with everyone stuck together, restless and looking for something to do with their hands and their minds. Rain did not just inconvenience your ancestors, it may have created the exact social pressure cooker that language and storytelling needed to develop and spread. There is a physical dimension to this that is easy to overlook. When a body is denied its usual range of movement, something shifts internally. Restlessness is not just a mental state, it is a physiological one. That pent-up physical energy had to go somewhere. Some of it likely became gesture, exaggerated storytelling movements, hands sweeping through the air to describe a hunt that could not currently happen. Some of it became rhythm, tapping, humming, swaying, the earliest ancestors of music, born not from leisure, but from bodies that needed an outlet and found one in sound instead of motion across open ground. There is also a colder, more practical layer to this. Fire had to be protected and fed constantly during wet weeks, since damp wood burns poorly and rain threatens to extinguish flame entirely. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham has argued that control of fire was one of the most transformative developments in human evolution, not just because it allowed cooking, which made food easier to digest and freed up energy for brain growth, but because it created a stable gathering point, a hearth, a center. During a week of rain, that hearth would have mattered more than ever. Everyone would have been drawn toward the same small circle of warmth and light, night after night, for far longer than usual. Wrangham's research suggests that this daily ritual around fire, extended by weather into something even longer, likely reinforced social hierarchies, cooperative bonds, and shared knowledge in a way that scattered daytime activity simply could not. So the picture starts to form. 7 days of rain, a small group crowded into a cave mouth or beneath an overhang. A fire carefully guarded, throwing shifting light against stone walls. Restless hands looking for something to occupy them. Restless minds looking for something to say. children watching adults for cues on how to behave, what to fear, what to value. Under those conditions, culture was not a luxury. It was almost inevitable. This also explains something that feels deeply familiar even now. You know this feeling. Rain outside, nothing urgent to do, and suddenly your mind reaches for stories, a show, a podcast, a long conversation with someone you live with, ancient behavior, still running quietly beneath your modern life like a background program you never chose to install but cannot delete either. There is another twist buried inside all of this, one that connects to danger rather than comfort. Rain did not just create boredom, it created risk. Rivers rose, predators, driven by the same discomfort humans felt, sometimes sought shelter in the same caves. Mudslides threatened poorly chosen camps. Groups who survived extended bad weather were likely the ones who communicated best, planned best, and cooperated most effectively under stress. The very weeks that forced humans into storytelling and bonding were also quietly selecting for the humans who were best at those things. There is a generational layer to this as well. Elders, whose bodies may have slowed with age, but whose memory stretched back across dozens of past seasons, likely became especially valuable during long stretches of bad weather. They would have remembered previous rainy weeks, previous close calls, previous solutions. A week of rain turned memory into a kind of currency, and those who held the most of it held real influence over the group's decisions. This is where the science and the poetry of human history meet. A miserable, wet, cramped week was not simply endured, it was, in a very real sense, practiced. Practiced storytelling, practiced cooperation, practiced patience, practiced creativity. Every rained-out week across tens of thousands of years functioned like an unplanned rehearsal for the skills that would eventually define human society. Language, art, music, even early forms of teaching, as older members of the group used dead time to pass down knowledge that had no urgent use that day, but might save a life next season. None of this happened because anyone planned it. It happened because human brains, faced with confinement and idle time, instinctively reached for connection. That instinct did not disappear once humans built roofs that did not leak and windows that sealed properly. It is still there, humming quietly under the surface of your own restless afternoons. Here is the modern mirror, and it might catch you off guard. Consider your own rainy days. The compulsive urge to text someone the moment you feel a little bored. The strange comfort of background noise, a show playing even when you are not fully watching it, almost like a digital campfire. The way long car rides in bad weather turn into deep conversations that never would have happened on a normal errand day. The way children, stuck inside during a storm, invent elaborate games and stories almost immediately, as if some ancient switch flips the moment stillness sets in. You are not simply passing time during those moments, you are running a script written tens of thousands of years ago, back when a week of rain meant survival depended on how well your group could talk, bond, plan, and imagine together. There is also something quietly humbling in this. Modern comfort has, in some ways, removed the very conditions that once forced this deep social bonding to happen. You can now sit in a room full of people during a rainstorm and never speak a single word to any of them, each person alone inside a private screen. The rain no longer forces connection the way it once did. The ancient pressure that built language, art, and shared identity has been quietly engineered out of daily life by comfort and convenience. That is worth sitting with for a moment. So what did ancient humans actually do when it rained for a week straight? They adapted, yes. They protected fire, rationed food, and waited out the storm. But underneath the practical survival, something far more important was happening. They talked more than usual. They told stories that outlived the rain by thousands of years. They pressed ochre-stained hands against stone walls and left marks that still exist today. They bonded in ways that shaped the emotional and social wiring you still carry inside you. And now tonight, when it rains outside your window and you feel that same pull toward connection, toward a story, toward a voice in the dark, know that you are not simply bored. You are remembering something your ancestors discovered by accident in a cave in the rain, thousands of generations before you were ever born.